Review.
Super Scribblenauts is in a precarious position. Coming out just 1 year after the release of its unique and silly predecessor, the latest adventure in dictionary land doesn't have the novelty of a brand new experience to fall back on. In some ways, Super Scribblenauts is better than the original. Tighter controls and predictable physics make movement much easier, and the inclusion of adjectives gives you even more wacky words to play around with. But the magic has disappeared. Many of the game's puzzles are built around specific solutions that severely limit your ability to be creative, and there are so many head-scratching restrictions in place that it's downright frustrating at times. Super Scribblenauts is still fun if you just play around with your extensive vocabulary, but the flat single-player levels fail to capture that special feeling the original exuded. The most obvious change in Super Scribblenauts is to the controls. In the original Scribblenauts, you had to rely on the touchscreen exclusively, which was imprecise at best. Although that is still an option in Super Scribblenauts, you can now use the directional pad as well. The Overhauled Controls mesh wonderfully with the improved physics, so you no longer have to fight the game in order to breathe life into your crazy creations. It's a smart system that removes much of the aggravation from the original game. Sadly, although the basics are much improved in Super Scribblenauts, the restricting levels are a step backward. Aside from a few bonus levels late in the game, every stage is of the puzzle variety. You enter a wacky situation and have a question posed to you. For instance, you may have to figure out the missing link in a lineup of animals, or dress like the 4 people you're trying to impress. The huge variety of different puzzles you encounter does a fine job of keeping you on your toes, but the solutions are extremely limited. In one level, you have to fill a classroom with appropriate items. Chalk, blackboard, desk, and other common objects can be conjured using the in-game keyboard, and you dutifully place them inside until the quota is met. But this is a boring puzzle. Instead of giving you a reason to be creative, it quizzes you on your scholastic knowledge. There are only so many objects that make sense, and the game doesn't give you the freedom to think outside the box either. Most of the puzzles in Super Scribblenauts play out in this fashion. A very specific question is posed, and you have to think of the appropriate answer. This is less a game about creative expression than trivial knowledge. More troubling is that the game doesn't even use real-world logic. When a hungry dog needs food, you would think that tasty meat would do the trick, but he won't eat that. You have to give him dog food instead. In the same level, you have to pose as a cop and stop a car from doing something illegal. If you try to plant stolen goods or a nuclear bomb nearby, nothing happens. But if you make a stop sign, you can pass by no problem. The game has very specific ideas of what it wants you to do, and if you think even slightly to the left of center, you fail. It's a frustrating system that punishes you for being creative. This lack of imagination is particularly troubling in Super Scribblenauts because the game has such outstanding tools for you to use. There are tens of thousands of objects, people, and animals you can conjure in the blink of an eye, and with the inclusion of adjectives, you can bring all sorts of wacky beasts to life. It's as fun as ever to materialize dinosaurs or robots in a flash, and there are so many words in the in-game dictionary that you can spend hours just trying to come up with something new. It's really impressive how many words this game recognizes, from internet memes to mythical animals, so it's a shame the levels don't allow you to dip into the creativity well to pass them. Super Scribblenauts is wasting its amazing potential. The huge improvement to the core mechanics, which leads you to believe this is an overall much more enjoyable experience, but the levels are downright boring far too often. Having to think of ultra-specific objects again and again is simply not fun, especially when a wealth of creative ideas are at your fingertips. Super Scribblenauts is still a lot of fun if you ignore the real levels and just play around in the sandbox, giving life to whatever ludicrous idea resides in your mind. But the puzzles just don't do justice to this incredible potential.